Welcome back to my channel, Beautiful Minutia. If you're new here, my name is Tiffany, and today I'm doing the Febregency Tag. If you're unaware of what Febregency is, it's a month to celebrate literature that was written during the Regency era, which took place from 1811 to 1820. And this event is hosted by Christy Lewis from Dostoevsky in Space, Emma from The Bookish Princess, Stephanie from Miss Rister's Reads, and Tristan from Tristan and the Classics. So I was going to preface this tag with something, but I'm just going to lump it into the first question, which is to name your top 3 Regency authors. And the fact is that there's a lot of Regency era literature that I have not yet read. And because it's such a short window of time, there's definitely less authors than there would be if it was a wider range of time, say like the Victorian period, which took place over a much longer scale of time. There was more things written during that time. So I haven't read nearly as much Regency era literature as I would like to. That's something that I definitely want to expand on. And I am reading from a brand new Regency era author this month, Oliver Goldsmith. I'll be reading The Vicar of Wakefield, but I haven't yet read that, so I can't say that he's a favorite. So my absolute top is 100% for sure Jane Austen, which is definitely kind of the cliche answer, and the Regency era author that probably just about everyone has read. That doesn't mean that I don't love her. The other author that I really enjoy is Mary Shelley, who wrote Frankenstein during the Regency era period, and it was published under a pseudonym during the Regency era and then was later published under her name after the Regency era was over. I really wanted to say Anne Radcliffe because Anne Radcliffe was immensely popular during the Regency era, but as it turns out, she wrote a lot of books in the 1780s and 90s and then wrote one in like 1826. So there's that chunk of time she didn't write anything during that time or didn't publish anything during that time. So that's kind of a bummer because I really wanted to say that because The Mysteries of Udolpho makes a very prominent appearance in Northanger Abbey. But unfortunately, I can't say that. And I can't say I have like lots of American authors that wrote during that time that I enjoy, but Regency era authors are supposed to just be, I think, British writers, much like the Victorian era. The people who are writing in America don't really count because it's specifically referring to people who are under British rule at the time. So I think that those are the only two authors that I can actually give. The next question is to name your top 3 Regency poets. And I love Regency era poetry because this is very much in the Romantic poet era, and Wordsworth is for sure hands down my favorite. But I also really, really love William Blake and Percy Shelley. Percy Shelley's poem Mutability is like one of my favorite poems of all time. So I want to dive more into more of the Romantic poets during this month. So I actually have a collection. I should have brought it in with me. Maybe I will show a clip here or something of this beautiful, beautiful book of the Romantic poets. And it has Coleridge in there and Lord Byron and Keats. I think I've read some Keats at some point, but it's been a really long time. So I have really not a whole lot of memory of that. So I can't really count him. But I specifically really want to read Coleridge especially, but also some Lord Byron. Question number 3 is favorite historical event that happened during this time period in Britain or elsewhere. So, you think of this time period, you think of the Napoleonic Wars, you think of the War of 1812, and both of these wars were concluded during the Regency era. But those aren't really necessarily my favorite things from the time period to study. I really like looking at some of the things that was historically happening with musicians at that time. Beethoven was huge during this time, as was Franz Liszt and Mendelssohn and some other really great composers. So that's something that I really like looking at during this time period, although that's not really a historical event. So that's not really true. Dia kind of stole my answer a little bit because I was going to say the Second Great Awakening, which took place in America during this time period. It started before, I think, the Regency era and extended past it. But this was a great spiritual awakening that happened in America. The first one happened with Jonathan Edwards, kind of more in the 1700s, and that's one that people might be more familiar with. But there was a Second Great Awakening that took place during the Regency era in America. And there was just a revival of people turning to the Lord and lots of people being converted and just like an outpouring of his presence and his spirit. And it's really, really cool because a lot of that originated in Tennessee and Kentucky, very close to where I currently live. So there's a lot of really cool historical Second Great Awakening stuff that is around me. Also, I was looking up other historical things that were happening during this time period, and I didn't know that dental floss was invented during the Regency era. So we have the Regency era to thank for dental floss. Question number 4, the year is 1860. It's a dark and stormy night on Lake Geneva. You're telling ghost stories with 3 legendary writers. Who are they? Bonus points if they're Regency era writers. So obviously this is setting the stage for Mary Shelley writing Frankenstein, while with Lord Byron and Percy Shelley in a very fateful summer when she conceived of Frankenstein. And I could say that Mary Shelley would be a great person, but because this question is about her, I wanted to choose people that weren't maybe quite as obvious, although my number 1 writer is really obvious, and that's going to be Edgar Allan Poe. Like, my word, like he writes the best horror in my opinion. Not all of his stuff is super ghostly, but some of them definitely have some ghostly components, like Follow the House of Usher, The Telltale Heart. There are some that definitely have kind of ghosty feels to them, but not all of his horror does. And I just, like, my goodness, he would really contribute the good, like, spook factor. In addition, I have to include Dostoevsky, who is one of my favorite authors of all time anyway, but Dostoevsky has written some ghost stories, and the ghost stories that he's written definitely have some commentary in them, but they're also quite funny. So I think that Dostoevsky would bring some levity to Poe's seriousness. And then lastly, I really would like to include a Bronte, maybe Emily, because I want the atmosphere of, like, Wuthering Heights. I don't necessarily want the characters, but I want that, like, moody moors kind of feel to it. I think that would be a great setting. So I want her for the setting, Poe for the story, and Dostoevsky for the levity. The next one says the Regency era was named after the regency of George, Prince of Wales, who ruled in the stead of his father, George III, from 1811 to 1820. If you had to appoint a regent to rule your booktube channel in your stead, who would it be? And this is a great question. I love it so much. So my initial off-the-cuff answer is Dia from Novel Idea, because if I can't be on my channel, Dia and I like a lot of the same books, and we very rarely diverge in our opinions. So we are, like, 99% of the time feel the exact same way about books. So it's kind of one of those things where it's like, if I can't be here, Dia is the most likely to express an opinion that would be more in line with my own. But there are other channels that I also really love. Like, what I really want is I want the aesthetic and the vibe of Chantel from Chantel Reads All Day. I want her vibe. So I want Dia to do the reviewing, but I want Chantel to do, like, all the B-roll and the editing, which I think Dia would appreciate, because Dia really doesn't like doing vlogs because the editing is so much work. So I think that would actually be a really good partnership. Question number 6 is, much of the Regency period is categorized as romantic. What word would you use to describe today's literature? So I'm gonna have a couple here. Some of them are more positive than others, because I'm not a huge fan of a lot of contemporary literature that is coming out. But I do have to say that something that I think is amazing in terms of today's literature is that it's super accessible and also very inclusive. So we live in an age where it is really easy for you to get your hands on books physically and digitally. And we live in an era where it is so easy to get your hands on translated works. And so it doesn't matter whether or not you speak the original language. So many of works that have been originally published in Korean or Japanese or Russian or French or whatever have been translated into English and now are really, really accessible for us in America. In addition, you don't have to be a rich white man to get your books published. We have a plethora of authors who are prioritized because of the diversity of their voices, and I absolutely love that we are in an era where it's not just kind of one group of people's opinions on things. It's very varied and you can read from a wide range of spectrums. However, I do think that we live in a time period where, in particular, adult literature, I find this to be a little bit less so with middle grade, but particularly adult and probably also young adult literature, it feels like there's a lot of pessimism and darkness. It feels like it's very bleak and that the writing itself feels very stark and bare bones. For a lot of authors that I have read, this is an overarching statement, so this is not true of many authors. There are many authors who still have rich, vivid, beautiful prose and who have light and hope in their stories and write things that are gripping and amazing, but there's a lot that is really focused on everything that's wrong with the world without any sort of hope or conclusiveness to make it any better. And so a word that I think both Christy and Dia used was disenchanted, which I think is very, very accurate. But the words that came to mind for me were bleak and stark. Question number 7 is Shakespeare's plays were popular during the Regency era. What artistic performance have you recently enjoyed? Movies, TV, and music can all count. So I'm not much of a movie person or a TV person overall, unfortunately. I say all the time that I have commitment issues, that I'm like, oh, I don't really want to spend 2 hours watching this. Do you know how much I could read or get done or all these other things? I'm basically turning into my mother because my mom always used to be like, I don't really want to sit down and watch a whole movie. And so that's kind of where I am at this point. But I do watch some TV shows, not a lot, but most of what I've been watching frequently are K-dramas. And I'm really enjoying my introduction into a lot of Korean culture over the last couple of years, K-drama being one of those and K-pop being another. Both of them are ways that I have been I've really enjoyed being immersed in that entertainment because I feel like there's such a priority put on quality and I really have enjoyed that. It doesn't feel like everything that's part of K-drama or K-pop is cookie cutter, and I feel that way a lot about American music and American movies. Feels like if one thing's popular, now everything's got to be like that. Every artist has to sound like that, and every song sounds really similar, and every like TV show or movie, it's like if this is what's popular, then now we all have to do that, and it just feels very cookie cutter, and I don't feel that way about Korean art. So shows that I've been enjoying recently, I just recently completed It's Okay Not to Be Okay, which I watched with my friend Christy, and I would say like this show has a lot of really triggering things because it does deal really heavily with mental illness, especially because one of the main characters is like a nurse or a nurse's aide in an asylum, and so there's a lot of really difficult things that are happening, and there's a lot of really toxicity in some of the relationships that get resolved over time, but it's kind of difficult to watch, especially at first. But I felt like it was so well done and kind of had some really amazing like fairy tale, like Tim Burton style fairy tale elements to it that were really interesting. And a lot of the episodes kind of tied into famous fairy tales, some of which being, you know, like Grimm's fairy tales and things like that, but some of them were Korean fairy tales as well. And one of the main characters is also an author of children's books, but they're very dark children's books because her childhood was very dark. And so there's like this dark fairy tale element, but also like real world stuff, and I just felt like that was so well done. And then my husband and I are currently watching Crash Landing on You, which I think a lot of people who aren't even into K-dramas have watched that one, and we're really enjoying it so far. We're only like 3 episodes in at the time of me filming this, and we watch like an episode a week, so it takes us a while to get through it. But I'm really enjoying that one. I feel like a lot of the cinematography in it is really, really lovely, but not the first episode because it's about this really snooty, rich South Korean heiress who is like basically taking footage for her fashion company where she is like paragliding, and then this tornado comes and like sweeps her into North Korea, and she's trying to find her way back home. And so there's the element of, you know, North Korea versus South Korea, but the scene where the tornado comes is like the special effects are quite cheesy, and it's very Wizard of Oz-esque in the way that they did it. So maybe that's intentional, I don't know. But other cinematography in it is really, really lovely. Songs that I've really been enjoying lately and performances. Thanks to Christy, I'm finally starting to enter my 80s era. They are like such incredible performers, like, oh my goodness. So I've been listening to a lot of 80s, watching their performances. In particular, Crazy Form is like, oh my gosh, like it's incredible. And then also Itzy's new album, Born to Be, is so good. Like every song on it's so good. But the performance video and the music video for the actual title track, Born to Be, is like unbelievable what they are doing with the choreography and like how it looks, and like, oh my gosh, it's so incredible. So I'll link both of those performances below in case you want to watch them. So the next question is, the Regency period was characterized by high fashion. What is a current fashion or trend in the book community that you adore or detest? I am not as sure about this one. In terms of trends in actual like books and stuff, I think that we've come to a time period where a lot of book covers look the same. Like there's a lot of romantic books that just kind of have these cartoony characters on them. There's a lot of them where that happens, like, and all the covers look really similar. But then I also, I'm gonna call it, I don't know if anyone's ever called it this, and I don't know if she was the first one to do it, but I'm gonna call it the Colleen Hoover effect, where all these books, just like the covers look really similar. And I feel the same way about The Villa, which I just recently read / DNF'd by Rachel Hawkins. Like all these books that kind of have like thriller romantic vibes to them, but their covers do not express that in any way at all. They just like look like light, fun books and they're not. And so it's really interesting, and it is weird that all these popular books have similar covers. It's kind of like I was talking about in American entertainment industry, where like all the movies, like, and TV shows and music, where it's like if something's popular, we're like, well, we want this to look like that, so people will watch our movies and listen to our music or read our books. If the cover looks like a Colleen Hoover book that was like a bestseller, people are going to want to pick it up if it looks similar. That's kind of how it feels to me. And I don't really like that. I like some originality, and I like covers to kind of have some kind of bearing on what the book is. I don't know that I really detest any of this stuff though, to be honest. I just kind of like roll my eyes a little and think it's a little silly. The final prompt says, Jane Austen's novels show us the importance of etiquette in the drawing rooms of Regency England. Tell us about your personal rating system. So I do use a 5-star rating system. I used to never rate books at all, but then once I got on Goodreads, it just kind of became habitual for me to rate books. I rarely do half stars. Sometimes I do, but I did a whole video on what the stars kind of mean for me, and I'll link that video because I'm pretty sure I still rate pretty similarly. So if you want a longer form video of me talking about that, you can go check that out. But just kind of a Cliff Notes version, 5 stars is like perfection. 4 stars is a book that I really loved and enjoyed, but wasn't quite up to that perfect level. 3 stars is either it had good elements and it had bad elements, or it was just kind of like meh, it was fine, it just kind of wasn't for me. So usually it means one of those things. So it could mean I read a book and I was like, oh, it was fine, or it could mean like I enjoyed parts of it, but I also had major issues with it. If I rate a book 3 stars, there's a very slim chance that I will ever reread this book. Like 4 and 5 stars are rereads. Sometimes I will do 3.5, and 3.5 means I think it had issues, but I would potentially reread it. Usually that's what the half star will mean for me. 2 stars is like usually pretty egregious. It's pretty awful, and there are things that bother the heck out of me in it, and I didn't think it had that much redemptive quality. If I read a book and I really disliked it, I'm probably going to rate it 2 stars. Sometimes I'll rate it 1 star, but a lot of times I can find something redemptive in most books, and so it's really rare for me to give 1 stars out. Very rare. Well, that's it for this tag. This was a fun and really kind of chatty tag about all things Regency era. So thank you to the hosts of Febregency for coming up with such a fun tag. I am going to tag some people, but I've seen this tag circulating quite a bit. So some of these people may have already been tagged. And if you are, I'm sorry, but this is who I'm tagging. I'm going to tag Miriam Elizabeth Reads, Kelly from Kelly Reads a Lot, Cheryl from the Candlewick Library, and Kate Howe, who I feel like someone's had to have tagged Kate in this, right? I feel like they probably have. So that's the one that I think might be the most redundant. But if you have been tagged, I'm sorry. I'd also love to hear from you in the comments down below. Feel free to answer any of these questions, to chime in with things that you think are interesting or questions that you want to answer. I always have all the questions of the tag linked in the description of my video. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, please hit like and also subscribe so you can continue to see more bookish content from me. And I will see you again next time.